this video, we'll look at how to create this breakfast nook. We'll be creating the breakfast table and chairs, plates, omelette, and a bread slice in the plate. And apply textures to all these objects using both image textures as well as noise textures. We'll also create walls and windows, and apply HDRIs for the world background. First, let's start with a new Blender file and delete existing objects. We'll create the breakfast tabletop here. Press Shift+A and add a circle. Numpad, period key to zoom in and frame the selected circle. Tab into Edit mode. Numpad 1 for front orthographic view. Press E+Z keys. Hold Ctrl and move the mouse to extrude on Z-axis as shown. Tab back into object mode. Add a bevel modifier and a subdivision surface modifier. Adjust bevel and subdivision surface modifier settings as shown. Go to front view by pressing numpad 1. Press G, Z, and numpad 1 keys to move the tabletop object 1 meters to the top. Next, we'll create the table legs. Press Shift+A and add a cube. Scale it down as shown here. Press S key and type 0.5 to scale down the size by half. Press G+Z key and type 0.5 to move the cube above the X-axis. Next, scale down to 1/10 on X-axis by pressing S and X keys and typing 0.1. Select the cube and tab into Edit mode. Press /key to hide the rest of the objects. Enable Face Select and select the top face of the cube. Press numpad 3 for side view. Press S and Y keys to scale along Y-axis as shown. Press / to unhide the tabletop. Create a linked duplicate with Alt or Option+D key. Left-click to confirm. Select the duplicate cube and press R and Z keys and type 90 to rotate it 90 degrees on Z-axis. Rename the objects as shown. Select the 3 objects in the outline and move them into their own collection. Press M key to create and move the object to New Collection. Select both the table legs and then select Tabletop. Press Ctrl+P key to parent. Now the table model is ready. Next, we'll work on creating a bar stool. Numpad 7 for top view. Hold Shift and right-click to move the 3D cursor as shown. Press Shift+A and add a circle. Press S key and type 0.25 to scale it down. Before we move on, select both the table legs and apply scale. Now, select the newly added circle mesh and tab into Edit mode. Press F to add a face to the circle. Press numpad 1 for front view, then press E+Z keys and move mouse holding Ctrl key to extrude. Tab back to object mode. Add a bevel modifier and adjust settings as shown. Also add a subdivision surface modifier and set the levels viewport to 2. Move the bar stool seat as shown with G+Z keys. Next, add a cube for bar stool legs with Shift+A keys. Scale down the cube and align it with the bar stool seat as shown. Press S key and drag the mouse inward to scale down. Press G plus Z keys and move the cube up on Z axis. Press S plus Z keys and drag the mouse to adjust scale on Z axis. Hold down Shift plus Control for precision snapping while scaling. Press S plus X and Control key for scaling down on X axis as shown. Press numpad 3 for side view. Press S plus Y and Control key for scaling down on Y axis as shown. We can add an array modifier to create the 4 legs of Bar Stool. Select the cube and add an array modifier. Change the shape to circle. Increase the radius and set the count to 4. Now tab into Edit mode. Select the bottom face of the cube wireframe in the middle. Press G plus Y keys and move the mouse slightly as shown to create slanted look for the bar stool legs. Tab back into object mode. Now we need to create supports for the bar stool legs. To do that, select the bar stool seat and press Shift plus D to duplicate. Press Z and Control plus Shift keys to align the duplicated object as shown. Create another duplicate object and align it to just below the bar stool seat. Select the newly duplicated objects. Right-click and select Join to join both the objects. Select the bar stool legs and apply the array modifier. Select the bar stool legs and the duplicated circles and press Command or Control plus J keys. Now the bevel and subdivision surface modifiers are applied to the bar stool legs from the duplicated circle objects. Rename the objects as shown. Hide the seat in the outliner window. Tab into Edit mode. Select the top and bottom faces of the 2 objects and press I to inset as shown. Deselect all. Select the top and bottom faces of the object. Right-click and select Bridge Faces. Do the same with the top object. Move the mouse onto the top ring and press L to select Linked under Cursor for isolated selection. Press S and Shift plus Z keys to scale down along X and Y axes while restricting it in Z axis. Press Option or Alt and click on the top faces while in Face Select mode. This selects the top face loop. Press numpad 1 for front view. Press S and Shift plus Z keys to scale the top faces inward as shown. Move the mouse onto the top ring and press L to select Linked under Cursor for isolated selection. Press numpad 1 for front view, then press G and Z keys and move down slightly as shown. Now do the same with the bottom rings. Tab back into object mode. Unhide the bar stool seat in the outliner window. Select the bar stool legs first and then the seat and press Ctrl+P keys and select Object to parent the legs to the seat. Now the bar stool model is ready. Let's increase the bottom width of the table legs. Tab into Edit mode and select the bottom face and press numpad 1 for front view. Press S and Shift+Z keys and scale as shown. Because the legs are linked duplicates, the transform change reflects in the other leg object by default. Press numpad 7 for top view. Now we want 4 bar stools around the table. I'll show a couple of ways to do that. Select the bar stool and add a mirror modifier. Set the mirror object to tabletop using the picker. We'll address the missing legs, but before that let's change some settings in mirror modifier. Select X and Y options next to axis in mirror modifier. Now to mirror the legs too, select the legs of the bar stool first and then click on the seat. In the modifier window, click on the down arrow in the mirror modifier header and click on Copy to Selected. This copies the mirror modifier to the legs and mirror them. The second way to do this is with linked duplicates. Remove the mirror modifier in both the bar stool seat and legs objects. Select bar stool seat and legs objects. Press Option or Alt+D keys to create linked duplicates. Press Y and type 2 to move the linked duplicate object 2 meters on Y-axis. Press Option or Alt+Z keys for X-ray mode and press numpad 1 key for the front view. Box selecting the bar stool now selects the one behind it too. Press Option or Alt+D, then press X key and type 2 and minus to move the duplicates -2 meters along X-axis. Now the table and bar stools modeling is complete. Next, we'll look at creating a plate filled with an omelette and a slice of bread, and also a glass filled with juice. Press numpad 7 for top orthographic view. Option+Z for X-ray mode. Move the mouse to align diagonally with the bar stool as shown. Hold Shift key and right-click to place the 3D cursor on top of the table. Press Shift+A keys and add a circle and scale down as shown. Select the circle and tab into Edit mode. Press /key to hide the rest. Press F key to make face. Numpad 1 for front view. Press E+Z keys to extrude along Z-axis as shown. Select the bottom face. Numpad 1 for front view and press S and scale inward as shown. Then, inset the bottom face a couple of times with I key as shown. Select the top face and inset with I key as shown. Press Option+Z keys for X-ray view and inset again using the bottom edges as reference. Left-click to confirm inset. With the top face still selected, press numpad 1 for front view. Press G+Z keys to move the face down as shown. Option or Alt+ left-click on inner edge and inset a couple more times as shown here. And add a grid fill for the selected face. Adjust the offset to align the edges to X and Y axes. Grid fill can be found in the face menu, and you could search for it with Alt or Option plus spacebar. Tab back into object mode and add a subdivision surface modifier. I used shortcut key Control or Command plus the number 2 key for a level 2 subdivision. Next, we'll create an omelette. Press numpad 7, move the mouse cursor slightly to the top left and hold Shift and right-click to move the 3D cursor. Add a circle with Shift plus a keys. Scale down the circle as shown. Move and adjust the size of the circle as shown. Tab into Edit mode and press F to make face. Move the circle 0.001 meters up on Z-axis to prevent the overlap with plate object. Press /key to hide the rest. Select the face and extrude along Z-axis. Add a bevel and a subdivision surface modifier. Inset with I key a couple of times as shown. Inset 2 more times to create supporting edge loops. Select the bottom face, do an inset with I key and add a grid fill. Select the top face and add a grid fill. Adjust the bevel settings to refine the appearance as shown here. Press number 1 key for front view and /key to hide the rest. Press A to select all and then S and Z keys to scale down along Z-axis. Adjust bevel settings to fix the appearance. Numpad 1 for front view and Option plus Z keys for X-ray mode and G plus Z keys to move the object to sit slightly above the plate. Tab back into Edit mode. Select the 4 faces in the middle and hold Control and keep pressing plus symbol key to expand selection. Expand selection up to the second edge loop. Create material colors for egg white and egg yolk as shown here. Select egg yolk material and click on Assign to apply the material to the selected faces. If you wish to select the egg yolk section of the faces later, you can create vertex group for the selection. With the faces selected, press Ctrl+G and select Assign to New Group. Now, in the Object Data Properties, you'll see the vertex group that you just created. It's a good practice to name it appropriately, and then use the Select and Deselect buttons to select the faces. You can also select the egg yolk section of the faces and then invert selection to select the rest of the faces. Let's adjust the egg yolk color to be a bit more darker. Numpad 7 for top view. Now change the select mode to vertex. Select the vertex in the middle and enable proportional editing. Numpad 1 for front view. Press G+Z keys and adjust the proportional size by scrolling the middle mouse button as shown. Drag the mouse up to protrude the selection a bit. Now Numpad 7 for top view. Turn on solid and X-ray mode in viewport shading. Omelette cannot exactly be circular. Let's use proportional editing to make it uneven. Box select the vertices and move it with G key as shown. Press /key to unhide the rest of the objects. I'll add a gray material color to the plate for now. Rename the omelette and the plate objects in the window. Next, we'll create a slice of bread. Numpad 7 for top view and hold Shift and right-click to move the 3D cursor as shown here. Add a cube and scale it down. Press G+Z keys and move it above the plate. Tab into Edit mode. Select the top and bottom faces and apply materials as shown here. One material for bread and one for the bread crust. Press Command or Ctrl+2 keys to add a Level 2 subdivision surface modifier. Now add some loop cuts to the bread with Command or Ctrl+R key. Add 7 loop cuts both horizontally and vertically. tab back into object mode. Let's rotate and align the bread to appear as if it's resting on the plate. Press our +Z keys and move mouse to rotate the bread on Z-axis as shown here. Change transform pivot point to 3D cursor. Select the bread and press our key to rotate. Press G + Z keys and drag the mouse down to rest the bread against the plate as shown here. Rename the cube in Outliner to bread. Also rename the material colors to bread and bread crust. Numpad 7 for top view. Now let's select the plate and use mirror modifier to display it in front of the remaining 3 chairs. The mirror object in the mirror modifier should be tabletop. Select X and Y in the axis property to mirror the plate appropriately. Select omelette and bread and then the plate in this specific order. Click the down arrow in mirror modifier and choose copy to select it to copy the modifier. Now the omelette and the bread slice appear on the remaining plates. Now the plate with omelette and a bread slice is ready. Next, we'll work on creating a glass filled with orange juice. Numpad 7 for top view. Move the cursor to the right side of the plate and hold the Shift key and right-click to move the 3D cursor. Press Shift + a keys and add a cylinder. Scaled it down 0.025 meters. Numpad 3 for side view. Press Command or Control + a keys and apply scale. Press G + Z key and drag mouse to move the cylinder above the table. Tab into Edit mode. Select only the top face. Press X and select Faces in the Delete menu. Press Numpad 1 for front view. Press Option + Z keys for X-ray mode. Change the selection mode to Edge and select the top edge loop. Press G + Z keys and drag the mouse as shown to increase the height. Let's switch back the transform pivot point to median point. Press /4 frame selection. Press E to extrude and right-click, then press S and scale inward as shown here. Numpad 1 for front view. Press E + Z keys and extrude downward by dragging the mouse. Inset the selected face a bit. Then add a grid fill and offset to align edges with the axis. Now select the faces on the top with Option + left click. Numpad 1 for front view. Press S key and Shift + Z keys to restrict scaling to X and Y axes. Tab back to object mode. Add a bevel modifier. Adjust the bevel settings as shown here. Press Command or Control plus 2 keys to add a subdivision surface modifier. Now let's add the glass material to this object. Switch to Material Preview. Setting Metallic to 1 and Roughness to 0 makes the object look metallic. Press /key to unhide the rest. Add a mirror modifier to replicate the glasses next to all the plates as shown here. Press /key to frame selected glass object. Click on the monitor icon on Mirror Modifier to hide it for now. Click on the bottom left editor icon and choose Shader Editor. In Principled BSDF node, set transmission weight to 1. Press Shift+A and type Mix Shader and add a Mix Shader node between Principled BSDF and Material Output. Click and drag the second Mix Shader input and add a transparent BSDF node. Adjust Mix Shader factor as shown here. Press Shift plus a keys and add a Fresnel node. Connect its factor output to factor input of Mix Shader. Adjust the IOR in the Fresnel node as shown here. Press Shift plus a keys and add a color ramp node between Fresnel and Mix Shader node. Adjust the black color to a lighter shade of gray. Slightly darken the white color ramp. Adjust the Fresnel and color ramp as shown here. Go to Render Properties and enable Ray Tracing. Go to Material Properties and set Render Method to Blended. The glass is now complete. Next, we'll add juice to the glass. Press /key to hide the rest. Press Shift plus D keys and right-click to duplicate the glass. Rename the objects to glass and juice respectively. Select the juice object and hide the glass object. Go to Material Properties and delete the existing glass material and add a new juice material. Adjust the base color as shown here. Adjust transmission weight and metallic and roughness properties as shown here. Now tab into Edit Mode. Set Viewport Shading to Solid Mode. select the inner faces of the juice object as shown. Press X and choose Faces in Delete menu to delete the selected faces. Press the number 2 key for edge selection mode. Press Option key and left-click on the bottom edge to select the bottom loop. Press E to extrude and right-click. Press S key to scale and Shift plus Z keys to restrict scale to X and Y axes. Add a grid fill to the selected edge loop. Now, press Option and left-click on the top edge of the juice object and press F to make face. Press I and inset as shown here. Inset once again, add a grid fill and adjust offset of grid fill to align with the axes. Unhide the glass object in the outliner and set the viewport shading to Material Preview. Numpad 7 for top view and scale down the juice object as shown here. Scale down until the juice object is barely touching the inside wall of the glass object. Press slash to unhide all. Depending on your computer, you can adjust the glass settings to make it appear more realistic. Now the breakfast table setup is complete. Let's add a camera now. Zoom out and pan the breakfast table and press Ctrl plus Alt or Option plus Numpad 0 keys to frame the view. Click on the lock icon below the camera on the right-hand side and further adjust the camera to frame the breakfast table properly. Next, we'll work on creating walls and windows. Press Shift plus S keys and select Cursor to World Origin to move the cursor back to default origin. Let's add a plane object to act as the floor. Set the size to 4 meters in the Add Plane menu. Select the plane and press Shift plus D keys to duplicate. Press R plus X keys and type 90 to rotate it 90 degrees on X-axis. Press G plus Z keys and type 2 to move the plane up 2 meters. Press G plus Y keys and type 2 to move the plane back 2 meters on Y-axis. Press Shift plus D to duplicate again. Press R plus Z keys and type 90 to rotate 90 degrees on Z-axis. Press G plus X keys and type 2 and minus. Press G plus Y keys and type 2 and minus. These two planes will form the walls, one with a window and one with stone bricks. Select the plane and tab into Edit mode. Right-click and choose Subdivide and set number of cuts to 3. Press the number 3 key to set selection mode to face. Select 4 faces in the middle of the plane and do an inset width by pressing the I key and dragging the mouse inward. Press Option plus S plus Y keys and drag the mouse to push in the selection. Press I to inset a little. Press I to inset and I again to inset individual faces as shown here. Press E to extrude and Y to restrict extrusion to Y-axis. With the faces still selected, let's add materials to the windows. Add materials for wall, window, and window glass. Add materials for wall, window, and window glass as shown here. Select the middle edges of the window as shown here. Press Command or Ctrl+B to add a bevel on the selected edges. Select the faces other than the windows. Click Assign to apply wall color. Select Window Glass Material. Expand Shading Editor from the bottom. Set Transmission Weight in Principled BSDF to 1. Add a Mix Shader node between Principled BSDF and Material Output. Add a Fresnel node to the factor input of the Mix Shader node. Add a transparent BSDF node to the second shader input of the Mix Shader node. Adjust IOR in Fresnel node as shown here. Set roughness to 0 in Principled BSDF. In Material Properties under Settings, set the render method to blended. That should be it for the glass window. Now, let's work on lighting and environment in the rendered viewport shading. Set viewport shading to rendered. Right now, we don't have any lighting setup. We can use environment texture to achieve that. In the shader editor, set the shader type to world. Before we proceed, make sure you have NodeWrangler Add-on enabled. Go to Edit Preferences. Make sure to select Add-ons tab. Search for NodeWrangler and click on the checkbox to enable it. If you don't have autosave enabled, click on the bottom left menu and choose Save Preferences and close the window. Now, select Background node and press Ctrl+T keys. This adds 3 nodes in a series. We are interested in the Environment Texture node. Environment Texture node needs a HDRI or High Dynamic Range image. You can download free HDRIs from polyhaven.com. I'm using this large corridor 2K resolution HDRI here. Now click on Open and select the downloaded HDRI. This is how the HDRI is displayed. We can adjust the light direction by changing the Z-axis in rotation property of the mapping node. We can also adjust the location. I'll add a RGB curves node between texture and background nodes. I'll set the rotation on Z-axis to 215 degrees. Now it appears as if sunlight is passing through the window. You can also adjust the curves to your liking. Set the background strength to 2.6 to brighten the environment. In this case, I don't want the background, but just the lighting from the HDRI. To do that, let's add a few more nodes. First, add a mix shader node between background and world object nodes. Add another background node and connect it to second shader input. Set the background color to dark gray. Add a light path node and connect the as camera ray output to factor input of mix shader. Now we only have the lighting setup with dark gray background as desired. Now let's work on making the wall object look proper. Tab into edit mode and press /key to hide the rest of the objects. Press a key to select all the faces. Press Shift+D keys and right-click to duplicate. Press R+Z keys and type 180 to rotate 180 degrees on Z-axis. Press numpad 3 for side view. Press G+Y keys and drag mouse to move as shown here. Now, select the top right edges of both the planes as shown and press F to make face. Now, select the top edge of the newly added face and click F key repeatedly until all the faces are filled. Now the wall is complete. Let's adjust the glass to be much more translucent. Adjusting the IOR in Fresnel should fix the translucency. Now select the second wall and switch to edit mode. Press E+X keys to extrude on X-axis. Type 0.2 and minus key to extrude backwards. Tab back to object mode. Now let's work on adding textures to objects. First, let's focus on the table. Select the tabletop and click on New in Shader Editor. Select Principled BSDF and press Ctrl+T keys to add default texture setup nodes. Select Image Texture node and press X to delete the node. Connect Mapping Vector output to base color input of Principled BSDF. Press Shift+A, type Noise and select Noise Texture. Add a color ramp node between Noise Texture and Principled BSDF. Connect Generated Output of Texture Coordinate to Mapping node. Now we can see the noise pattern on top of the table. We can adjust the color ramp to darken or lighten the noise. Scale in Noise Texture determines the density of the noise. I'll adjust the noise settings to the values as shown here. Next, we'll add wooden texture for the table legs. For the table legs, I'll be using free image texture from polyhaven.com. I'm using the oak veneer image texture shown here. Download and unzip or extract the files. Select the table legs and click on New in the shader editor. Select Principled BSDF and press Ctrl plus Shift plus T keys. Open the Oak Veneer folder and then the Texture folder. Select all the 5 files that are listed and click on Add Principled Texture button. This adds and connects all the necessary texture nodes instead of us manually adding every node. If the image texture doesn't appear, make sure UV output is connected to the vector input of mapping node. This looks great. If we want to realign the texture, we can do so in the UV editor. We'll look at how to do that while adding texture for the bar stool. First, let's fix the gap between the bar stool seat and the legs. Select the seat and tab into Edit mode. Select the bottom face and move it down Z-axis with G plus Z keys. I'll also go ahead and join the bar stool seat and legs. First, select the legs, then the seat, and right-click and choose Join. Now, select the bar stool and remove any materials that exist in Material Properties. Click on New. Select the Principled BSDF node and press Ctrl plus Shift plus T. Select all the images in the Oak texture. All the necessary nodes are automatically added based on the texture images. We can see that the seat and the support rings around the legs do not have the texture. Let's fix that in the UV editor. In the UV editor, press A to select all the faces of the bar stool. Make sure the edit mode is on in the right window. Click on the UV menu, select Smart Project and click on Unwrap. The Unwrap lays all the faces of the bar stool on a flat 2D plane on the left window. Selecting a face or all the faces on one window should reflect on the other. If it's not happening, make sure UV Sync selection is enabled. We can see here that the seam of texture is visible prominently. To fix it, let's tab into Edit mode. Move the mouse over the seat and press L for Linked Select. The selected faces are highlighted on the left window. Now we can move with G key or rotate with our key as shown here. We can scale it too. I'll rotate the selected faces to make the wood grain appear vertical. I'll do the same to the support rings of the bar stool. Mouse over the support ring and press L for Linked Select. Press R and rotate it 90 degrees as shown here. Do the same for the second support ring. Let's adjust the rotation of seat faces to 90 degrees. If you're wondering why the faces outside the image have texture, the underlying image is repeating. The faces are actually wrapping around. This looks great. The tabletop is not quite matching the aesthetic. Let's fix that. Select the tabletop. Remove the noise texture node. Add a wave texture node. Adjust the settings as shown here. Change the color to darkish brown in the color ramp. Drag the color ramp sliders as shown to adjust the width of the stripes. Adjust the scale on wave texture to wider brown stripes. Change the wave profile to saw. That should be it for the table texture. Next, we'll work on creating a stone wall texture. We'll create it using the default brick texture node. Select the wall and click New. Select Principled BSDF and press Ctrl+T keys. Delete image texture and add a brick texture node. Connect vector output of mapping to vector input of brick texture. Adjust the stone and mortar colors as shown here. Now add a noise texture node. Connect its factor output to a bump node's height property. Connect the normal output of bump node to normal input of principled BSDF node. Adjust the strength and distance in bump node as shown here. Adjust the scale and detail in noise texture node as shown here. Adjust mortar smoothness in the brick texture node as shown here. Now, connect the color output of the brick texture to height input of a displacement node. Connect displacement output to displacement input of material output node as shown here. Adjust scale in displacement as shown here. We can tweak noise and brick texture nodes properties further to change the appearance to our liking. That should be it for the wall. Now let's frame the layout for camera. You can press numpad 0 for camera view. Click on lock icon below camera icon. Zoom and pan to your liking. Let's check how it appears in rendered preview. I'll tweak the world shading the shader editor to brighten the Breakfast Nook. Now let's add a background for the environment. Click on the second background node and press Ctrl+T keys. I'll be using this Chinese garden HDRI from polyhaven.com for background. Click Open and choose the Chinese garden HDRI. I'll adjust the location and rotation of the background in the mapping node. Basically, I want the greenery to appear through the window, and adjust the camera framing and settings. I want the background to be visible only through the window. We can extend the walls to hide it. Select the window wall and tab into Edit mode. Select the 4 faces on the right. Press E+X to extrude on X-axis and drag the mouse. Do the same with the stone wall. This ruined the brick texture. We can fix it in UV editor. First, select the 2 faces and make a single face by F key. Repeat the step for the back of the wall. Switch to UV editor. In the UV editor, press A to select all the faces. Click on UV menu in the right window. Select Smart UV Project and click on Unwrap. Select the 2 large faces and rotate 90 degrees. Press G and align the brick texture with the left faces. Select all the faces with a key and scale with S key as shown here. Back to the Layout tab. Numpad 0 for camera view or click on the camera icon. Align the scene to your liking or as shown here. Let's add additional light to the scene. Press Shift+A, Light and select Sun. Adjust the strength in the light properties. Select the sunlight and move it outside the wall as shown here. Move the mouse cursor over the table and press Shift+T keys. This will point the light where the mouse is. Press or plus Z and drag the mouse to align the light and shadows with the existing light and shadows. That's great. The scene is almost complete. I have missed applying the texture to the bread slice. Select bread and press /key. Disable the mirror modifier for now by clicking on the monitor icon. Numpad period, symbol key to frame selected. Expand the shader window and select bread material. Select principled BSDF and press Ctrl+T keys. Delete image texture and add a noise texture. Add a color ramp between noise texture and principled BSDF. Adjust the scale, detail, and roughness in noise texture as shown here. Let's also change the color ramp color. Some more change to noise scale. Duplicate the noise texture node. Connect the factor output to a bump node. Connect the bump node output to normal input in principled BSDF. Adjust its settings as shown here. Adjust both the noise texture node settings. Add a displacement node connected to the color output of the first noise texture node. Connect second noise texture factor output to height of the bump node. Looks somewhat like a bread texture. Tweak the noise texture and bump node settings some more as shown here. That should be it for the bread texture. Let's update the bread crust material. I'll just update the color here. Let's switch to render mode. That completes the Breakfast Nook. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.